The mud was cold, a thick, cloying sludge that sucked at Captain Eva Rostova's boots as she lay gasping at the base of the 12-foot wall. Rain sheeted down, turning the obstacle course into a special kind of hell. Her arms, already trembling from a dozen previous failures, felt like lead weights. From above, the gruff voice of the instructor, Master Sergeant Cole, cut through the downpour. "Time's up, Rostova. Fail." She pushed herself up, wiping a mixture of rain and frustrated tears from her face. The other candidates, a cadre of hardened rangers and broad-shouldered Green Berets, had scaled the wall minutes ago with effortless, rope-burning speed. They watched her now from the dry cover of the ready shack, their expressions a mix of pity and dismissal. She was the outlier, the intelligence officer who had no business trying out for a joint special operations task force. She was a weaver of information, a speaker of languages, not a breaker of bodies. The rest of the day was a parade of humiliations. On the firing range, her grouping was tight, but her reloads were just a second too slow. Fail. In the simulated CQC house, her technique was textbook, but she lacked the explosive aggression they demanded. Marginally pass. The final report would read like a death sentence for her career ambitions. Captain E. Rostova, physically unsuitable. That night, in the barren barracks room, the silence was louder than any explosion. She unzipped her duffel bag, the sound final and hollow. From a small, waterproof pouch, she retrieved a creased photograph. It showed a much younger version of herself, standing between her father, a U.S. Air Force general whose chest was a mosaic of medals, and her mother, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Her mother, Alina. The weight of their legacy felt heavier than any rucksack. Her father had expected her to follow in his footsteps, to be a warrior in the open, glorious sense. But her mother had given her a different inheritance, a fluency in Russian, an understanding of the shadows, a mind built for nuance. And right now, that inheritance felt worthless. She folded the photo with a sigh that came from the very depths of her soul. This was it. She had failed. She was packing her belongings, each item a reminder of a dream she wasn't tough enough to grasp. The uniform she had hoped to wear with honor was just fabric. The boots were just leather. She was just a desk jockey who had overreached, a disappointment to the memory of both her parents. The image of Master Sergeant Cole's dismissive checkmark on his clipboard was seared behind her eyes. She zipped the duffel bag closed. The sound was like a tomb sealing shut. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a fittingly grim soundtrack to the end of her ambition. She had given everything she had, and it simply wasn't enough. The task force was for soldiers, and she had just proven she was not one of them. The duffel bag's zipper was halfway closed, sealing away her career, when a sharp knock rattled the barracks door. Ava froze, her heart lurching. It couldn't be Cole coming to rub it in. She swallowed hard and opened the door. The man standing there was not the master sergeant. He was taller, older, with a quiet intensity that filled the space without a word. It was Master Chief Harlan, the SEAL commander who oversaw the entire selection process. His eyes, the color of a winter sea, scanned the room, taking in the packed bag on the cot. "Captain Rostova," he said, his voice a low, calm rumble. "A word?" He didn't wait for an invitation. He simply stepped inside, his presence making the small room feel even smaller. Ava stood rigidly, bracing for the official dismissal. But Harlan didn't look at her with pity or disdain. He looked curious. He picked up the photograph she had left on the bedside table, studying the faces of her parents. "General Rostov is a fine officer," Harlan stated, setting the photo down gently. "A hero of Desert Storm. But this," he said, tapping the image of her mother, "this is the interesting part. Alina Petrova, codename Nightingale." Eva's breath caught in her throat. How could he know that name? It was a secret, a piece of her mother's past buried deep in classified files. Harlan's gaze was distant, looking through her into another time. "Berlin, 1985, he began, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "I was a young SEAL on a diplomatic protection detail. A sideshow. The real action was in the shadows. Your mother was one of the bravest people I never officially met." He painted a picture with his words, a scene of muted colors and constant fear. A young ballerina, Alina, gliding through checkpoints, her smile a mask for a heart hammering against her ribs. He spoke of whispered conversations in crowded opera houses, of information passed in the brush of a hand, of a courage that had nothing to do with physical strength and everything to do with steely nerves. She didn't have a rifle, Harlan said, his eyes locking with Ava's. Her weapons were her smile, her memory, her understanding of a culture everyone else saw as a monolith. She saved lives, Captain. Dozens of them. Because she knew how to listen. He turned and looked at the duffel bag. This assessment, it's a blunt instrument. It's designed to find hammers. But some of the most critical missions require a scalpel. He finally delivered the reason for his visit, his words simple and direct. Your spot on this task force is not a gift. It is a strategic allocation. I am not giving you a second chance because I feel sorry for you. I am ordering you to stay because this unit needs what you have. It needs Alina Petrova's daughter. With that, he turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. The silence he left behind was different now. It was no longer hollow. It was charged with possibility. Ava looked at the duffel bag, then at the photograph. Her mother's gentle eyes seemed to look back at her with a new sense of purpose. The failure on the obstacle course suddenly felt irrelevant. It was the wrong test. Master Chief Harlan hadn't seen a failure on that field. He had seen a key for a lock no one else even knew existed. Slowly, deliberately, she unzipped the bag and began to unpack. The next morning, the atmosphere at the training site was thick with tension. The other candidates watched Ava with a new wary curiosity. She had been defeated, packed, and ready to leave. Yet here she was, lacing up her boots with a quiet focus that unnerved them. Master Sergeant Cole's face was a granite mask of disapproval. He had seen weak links before, and they always broke. He saw Harlan's intervention as a dangerous bending of the rules, a sentimental mistake that could get men killed. The day's exercise was a high-stakes simulation, a hostage rescue in a meticulously constructed mock-up of an Afghan village. The briefing was all about speed and violence of action. The intelligence, provided by a drone overhead, was simple. 4 hostiles, 2 hostages in the central compound. The plan, drawn up by the team's appointed leader, a broad-chested ranger named Davis, was straightforward. 2 teams would breach simultaneously from the north and south, overwhelming the enemy with coordinated force. Eva studied the grainy drone feed, her mind working differently. She wasn't just counting targets. She was reading the scene. The body language of the figure guarding the door wasn't aggressive. It was slumped, almost weary. She saw an old man, his hands partially visible, and they weren't bound. He was gesticulating, talking animatedly. She focused on the audio feed, a chaotic mix of static and foreign speech. The others heard angry shouting. But Ava, fluent in Dari, heard the subtle inflections of fear, not fury. As the team geared up, checking rifles and flashbangs, she approached Davis. "Sergeant, I have a concern," she said, her voice calm but firm. Davis barely looked up from cinching his body armor. "What is it, Rostova?" "Don't tell me you're scared." A few of the men chuckled nervously. "It's the audio," she persisted. "The elder in the compound. He's not threatening the hostages. He's pleading with the guards. He's saying, 'Please, they have my family. I had to do this.' They're being coerced." Davis shook his head, a gesture of pure impatience. "Intel says hostiles. The plan is the plan. We don't have time for language lessons." The dismissal was absolute. The team moved into their starting positions, the countdown beginning. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. She saw the entire scenario unfolding in her mind, a bloody, tragic mistake. Good men would assault a group of terrified, cornered men defending their families. It would be a slaughter of innocents. Just as Davis raised his hand to signal the breach, a calm, authoritative voice crackled over everyone's radio. It was Master Chief Harlan, observing from the command tent. "All units, stand down. Abort the breach. I say again, abort!" A wave of stunned silence fell over the team. Davis's face flushed with anger and confusion. Harlan's voice came back, steady and clear. "Captain Rostova, what is your assessment?" Every eye turned to her. The pressure was immense. She keyed her mic, her voice surprisingly steady. "Sir, the primary hostiles are not in the compound. They are holding the guards' families elsewhere. The men inside are victims. A direct assault will result in unnecessary casualties and fail the primary objective of rescuing the hostages safely. Request permission to initiate a negotiated surrender." The silence on the radio stretched for an eternity. Then, 2 words came through that changed everything. "Permission granted." Davis stared at her, his jaw clenched, but he gave a sharp, reluctant nod. The mission was now in the hands of the woman who had failed every physical test. Her real test was just beginning. The weight of the team's focus was a physical pressure on Eva's shoulders. She could feel the skepticism radiating from Davis and the others, a wall of doubt as formidable as the compound wall itself. But Master Chief Harlan's command had carved a path, and she had no choice but to walk it. She moved to a covered position with a sight line to a small barred window on the compound's ground floor. The assault team held their positions, fingers resting on triggers, their aggressive posture now one of tense, uncertain support. Eva took a deep breath. Pushing the radio mic close to her lips, but speaking in a calm, projected voice in fluent, colloquial Dari. "Peace be upon you, respected elder. I speak to the man inside who is protecting his family. We hear you. We know you are not here by choice." The silence from the compound was absolute. She could imagine the shock inside. This was not the voice of an enemy soldier. It was the voice of a woman, speaking their language with the respect and nuance of a local. After a long moment, a tremulous voice replied from behind the wall. "Who are you?" "Is this a trick?" The fear was palpable. Ava continued, her tone soft but unwavering. "I am a soldier, but I am also a daughter. I understand the weight of family. The men who hold your children have lied to you. We are not here to harm you. We are here to help, but you must trust me." She painted a picture of safety, of a future where his family would be whole again. She spoke not as a conqueror, but as an ally. Inside, an argument erupted, hushed but fierce. The elder was trying to convince the younger, more hot-headed guards. Ava heard snippets. "She speaks the truth. It is a trap." She knew she was losing them. She had to offer something tangible. "Listen to me," she said, her voice gaining a new urgency. "The men outside are prepared to storm this building. If they do, many will die. Your children will be orphans. But if you lay down your weapons and walk out with your hands open, I give you my word, you will see your families tonight. Your courage now will save them." The silence that followed was heavier than before. It was the silence of a decision being made. Davis's voice hissed over her private earpiece, separate from the main channel. "Rostova, we're losing light. This is taking too long. We need to move." She ignored him, her entire being focused on the window. Then a miracle. A rifle was tossed out into the dirt. Then another. The wooden door creaked open slowly. The old man emerged first, his hands high, tears streaming down his face. Behind him, the 2 young guards followed, their faces etched with a mixture of shame and relief. The assault team moved in swiftly, securing the men with a surprising gentleness. The hostages, who were actually the elder's brothers, embraced him, sobbing. The mission was over. It had been a complete bloodless success. As the team stood down, the atmosphere had shifted. The looks from the other operators were no longer just skeptical. There was a dawning respect, a confusion that was slowly turning into admiration. Davis walked over to her, not meeting her eyes directly, but gave a single curt nod. It was more meaningful than any words. Ava felt a quiet surge of validation. She hadn't scaled a wall or won a fight. She had won a conversation. And in doing so, she had saved lives. Master Chief Harlan had been right. The field test wasn't the real test at all. The bloodless resolution of the village exercise did not magically erase all skepticism, but it carved out a new and uncertain space for Ava within the team. The final phase of selection was the most daunting, a full-scale, multi-day field problem simulating the hunt for a high-value target. The briefing packet described the poet, a former academic turned ideological extremist, a ghost who had evaded capture for years. The target was known for his elaborate security and his utter silence in the digital world. The conventional wisdom was to track his lieutenants, to find a physical footprint. For 2 days, the team operated on pure muscle. They conducted surveillance on safe houses, analyzed vehicle patterns, and set up observation posts. They were chasing echoes. Ava worked alongside them. Her physical endurance pushed to its limit, but her mind was elsewhere. While the others studied maps and satellite imagery, she immersed herself in the target's past. She read his old doctoral thesis on pre-Islamic Persian poetry. It wasn't dry academic work. It was passionate, almost lyrical. The man was not just an ideologue. He was an artist who had traded his pen for a sword. On the third night, as the team sat in a dimly lit tactical operations center, frustration was boiling over. Davis pointed at a map littered with dead-end markers. "He's a ghost. We're wasting our time." Ava, sitting at a laptop, spoke without looking up. "He's not a ghost. He's lonely." A few heads turned. She continued, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "He's cut off from the world he loved. He can't stop being who he was. Look." She pulled up the obscure, heavily moderated online forum dedicated to classical Middle Eastern poetry. It was a digital sanctuary for scholars. He can't resist. He has to engage. He has to be seen, even from the shadows. Using a meticulously crafted digital identity as a Turkish literature student, Ava began to post. She quoted verses from his favorite poets, posing subtle, respectful questions about interpretation. For hours there was nothing. Then, a user with a randomly generated name replied. The response was academically sharp, correcting a minor point she had intentionally fudged. It was him. She could feel his intellectual arrogance, his need to be the authority. The team gathered around her screen, the hunt now unfolding in lines of text instead of on a battlefield. Eva engaged him in a delicate dance of words, a duel of intellects. She praised his insights, drawing him out. She shared a personal poem she had written, echoing themes of loss and isolation she knew would resonate with him. The conversation grew deeper, more personal. He began to lament the loss of true art in the modern world. Sensing an opening, Eva typed, "It is a tragedy. True beauty requires a quiet place to be appreciated, a sanctuary away from the noise." The target, perhaps caught in a moment of vulnerability, took the bait. "There is one place left," he replied. "The old library near the market square. The scent of old paper is the last honest perfume in this city." A wave of electric tension went through the room. They had him. The team moved with lightning speed. While Eva kept the poet engaged online, the assault force descended on the library. The capture was so swift and quiet that by the time Eva typed her final congratulatory message to the target, he was already in custody. She had led them to him not by following his footsteps, but by walking through the landscape of his mind. The team looked at her not as a linguist or a negotiator, but as a hunter of a kind they had never seen before. She had turned a man's soul into a weapon and used it against him. The final day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the mud and rain of Eva's first failures. The candidates, now a weathered and bonded group, stood at attention on the parade ground. The air was thick with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Master Sergeant Cole stood rigidly to the side, his expression unreadable. But all eyes were on Master Chief Harlan as he stepped forward to address them. His gaze swept over the faces of the men, pausing for a moment on Ava, who held her posture with a quiet confidence she had not possessed weeks before. "Over the last month," Harlan began, his voice carrying easily in the morning quiet, "you have been pushed, broken, and rebuilt. You have proven you possess the physical and mental fortitude required for this work. You have learned to be hammers, and in the right situation, a hammer is the perfect tool." He paused, letting the words settle. "But the enemy we face is complex. They hide behind cultures, within communities, in the darkest corners of the human psyche. Smashing a lock is effective only if you are sure of what is behind the door. Sometimes what you need is not a hammer, but a key." He took a step closer to the formation. "This selection process is designed to identify warriors, but warrior spirit takes many forms. Captain Rostova," he said, turning fully to her, "you failed to meet the standard on the obstacle course. You were slower on the range. By the initial metrics, you did not belong here." A ripple of tension went through the ranks. "But metrics are blind. They measure force. They do not measure understanding. When this team was ready to kick down a door, you heard a plea for help. When we were hunting a ghost, you found a lonely man. You reminded every person here that our greatest weapon is not our rifle, but our ability to understand the enemy." He looked back at the entire group. "Captain Rostova is a scalpel. In a toolbox full of hammers, the scalpel is the most specialized, the most precise, and in the moment of greatest need, the most vital. She has earned her place on this task force not in spite of her differences, but because of them." The recognition was public, absolute, and tailored specifically to her unique value. It wasn't an apology for her early struggles. It was a validation of the very skills that had caused them. The applause that came from her teammates was not polite. It was robust and genuine. Davis, standing beside her, gave a firm nod of respect that meant more than any medal. As Harlan presented her with the task force pin, Eva felt a surge of emotion that was difficult to contain. The small, simple badge was heavier than it looked. It represented not just her own endurance, but the vindication of a different kind of courage. She had been measured against the wrong standard, and Master Chief Harlan had been the only one wise enough to see it. He had not changed the rules for her. He had simply understood the game better than anyone else. She was no longer the officer who had failed. She was the specialist they needed. The ceremony ended, and the new task force members broke formation, clapping each other on the back, their voices a happy din of relief and accomplishment. Eva stood slightly apart, the new pin cool and heavy on her chest. She watched Master Chief Harlan walk away, his job complete. The weight of his words still echoed within her. He had seen her mother in her. He had seen the potential for a weapon where others saw only a weakness. She found a quiet bench near the barracks, the sun warm on her face. The noise of the celebration felt distant. This moment was not for her teammates. It was for her. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over her father's number. General Rostov, the man who had taught her about duty and honor, but whose language had always been one of clear lines and overwhelming force. How would he see this victory? Would he understand a triumph won with words instead of weapons? She took a deep breath and pressed call. The line rang twice before he answered. "Ava." His voice was its usual measured tone, the voice of a man who commanded armies. "Dad," she said, her own voice surprisingly soft. "I made it." "I'm in." There was a silence on the other end. She could picture him in his study, surrounded by maps and the mementos of a conventional war. "I heard," he said finally, and the two words were laden with a complexity she hadn't expected. "Harlan called me. He said you were the most valuable asset in the selection. He said you have your mother's gift." Ava's breath caught. Harlan had called him. He had already explained it in a way her father would understand. The general continued, his voice losing some of its stern formality, revealing the man beneath. "I pushed you to be a soldier in my image, Ava. I thought that was the only way to be strong, to protect you." He paused, and she heard a faint tremor she had never heard before. "But Alina, she was the strongest person I ever knew. Her courage was a quiet thing. It lived in the shadows. I was too proud to see that the same courage was in you all along. I am so proud of you, Eva. You finished the journey your mother started." Tears welled in Eva's eyes, blurring the parade ground in front of her. They were not tears of sadness, but of a profound and healing relief. For her entire life, she had felt like a disappointment, a daughter who could never live up to her father's legacy of visible, medal-earning heroism. Now she understood that her legacy was always meant to be different. It was a legacy of whispers, of understanding, of saving lives without firing a shot. Her father's pride, finally given not for what he wanted her to be, but for who she was, felt like the highest honor imaginable. She had not just earned a place on a team. She had forged a new understanding with the most important man in her life. The journey was indeed complete. The phone call ended, leaving a profound silence in its wake. Ava sat on the bench for a long time, letting the sun warm her skin and the weight of her father's words settle in her soul. The cheers from her teammates had faded as they moved inside to change, their boisterous celebration a world away from her quiet revelation. She looked down at the task force pin, running her thumb over its cool, etched surface. It was no longer just a symbol of acceptance by the unit. It was a bridge between two halves of herself. She thought of her mother, Alina, not as a faded photograph or a tragic story, but as a real woman. A woman who had walked through checkpoints with a smile that hid a heart full of fear, who had passed secrets that shaped the fate of nations, whose greatest weapon was her profound understanding of the human heart. Ava had spent her life trying to measure up to her father's world of salutes and squadron formations, seeing her mother's legacy as something soft and separate from true service. She saw now how wrong she had been. The courage to breach a door was undeniable. But the courage to walk through it alone, armed with nothing but your wits and a belief in your cause, was perhaps even greater. Master Chief Harlan had not given her a handout. He had seen a specific critical need and recognized the one person who could fill it. He hadn't lowered the standard. He had correctly identified it. The obstacle course and the rifle range were important, but they were not the whole story. The real test was in the village, in the digital hunt for the poet. Those were the battlefields where her particular strength was not just an advantage, but a necessity. She stood up, feeling a new sense of alignment. The conflict was gone. The desperate need to prove herself in a language that was not her own had vanished. She was Captain Eva Rostova, daughter of a great general and a heroic spy. She was the scalpel in a toolbox of hammers, and when the moment came that required a precise, delicate touch in the midst of chaos, she would be ready. She walked toward the barracks, not with the swagger of the other operators, but with a quiet, grounded certainty. Davis was coming out, his gear slung over his shoulder. He saw her and stopped, offering a genuine, if still slightly awkward, smile. "Rostova, good work out there." It was simple, direct, and utterly sincere. She nodded. "You too, Sergeant." There were no more barriers. She was one of them, but entirely herself. She had not conquered the wall that had once defeated her. Instead, she had found a gate, and Master Chief Harlan had simply shown her where the key had been all along. The mission was ahead, and for the first time, she knew exactly who she was meant to be for it.